Good morning and welcome back to Regions Week, the 21st European Week of Regions and Cities. And our theme for this year is Thriving Regions and a Stronger Europe. This morning's session is entitled Breaking Barriers to Cross-Border Cooperation. My name is Jennifer Baker. I'm an EU policy journalist based here in Brussels, and I'll be your moderator for the session, guiding you through the agenda and putting your questions to our excellent speakers. Now, it's important to talk about breaking down those border barriers because the European Union has more than 40 internal border regions, and that represents about 40% of the Union's territory and about 30% of the EU population. So you can see that there's a real opportunity to make a difference in many, many lives of those people living in those border regions. Every border has a project. They are laboratories of European integration, real living cross borders that evince the very soul of the European Union. So we're going to focus on that this morning. But first, a little bit of housekeeping. We have, of course, got simultaneous interpretation. So you can grab your device. We have it in English, French, German, Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese. Just select the number on your headset. We're also going to use Slido, and you can go to slido.com on your smartphone, or you can scan the QR code that you can see there on the screen. If you go to slido.com, just put in the hashtag EURegionsWeek, and that will give you the opportunity to interact in real time with our speakers, no matter where you are in the audience. And of course, that EURegionsWeek hashtag is the one we're using across all the social media channels, so make sure to get those outside the room involved in the conversation. And if you want to talk about this morning's specific event, you can use the hashtag cross-border cooperation. Now, we're first going to kick off with a video, and we chose this particular video because it represents exactly how cooperation should work on the ground and really demonstrates how Interreg can be a game changer for local communities. So let's have a look.
Coupure d'eau, l'eau est saine, il n'y a plus de problème avec certains produits qu'il y avait au niveau des grès des Vosges. Maintenant qu'on est relié en Allemagne, il n'y a plus de soucis.
Also wir schön, aber wir freuen uns, wenn wir für unsere Nachbarn ein gutes Trinkwasser liefern können, wenn wir bei den Problemen bei der Trinkwasserversorgung in der Wengelsbach helfen können mit einer Leitung dorthin.
Well, I think that video probably not only makes you thirsty, but really demonstrates how working together across borders can unlock great opportunities. And that's what we're going to talk about over the next hour or so. So I want to invite on stage my first three speakers for this session. So we're very welcome to have join us on stage Sławomir Tokarski, who is Director in DG Regio in the European Commission. Martin Guillermo Ramirez is Secretary General of the AEBR, the Association of European Border Regions. And Paolo Pettiziol is President of EGTC Go. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. I'm sure, as I can see, that video certainly whetted your appetite and set out some of the really good examples. But I'd like, Sławomir, to hear from you more generally. What is most important about cross-border cooperation? What is the added value? How does it create solutions, not just in one specific case, but more broadly? And how does that really foster the sorts of communities and EU attitude that we want to see?
Right. Thank you very much. Well, I will be quite short because we have a lot of speakers to whom I would like to listen to. But if you ask me, I see sort of 5 things that comes to my mind when talking about Interreg and about added value. And I will also say that Interreg has 30 years now, but perhaps today is more needed than ever. And I think the first thing is that comes out quite easily from the video that we have just seen. Interreg brings people closer. Interreg brings the feeling of solidarity, of empathy, of trust in your neighbor. And it's something that we need today more than ever if we look at the sort of xenophobic and divisive politics that we are confronted with quite often. And you can also see that projects like this, they really build a lot of positive emotions and positive energy. And this project, which might have costed a couple of thousands or a couple of dozens of thousands of euro, had a sort of disproportional effect on people who were participating in it. And this effect is not limited to the fact that they just got the access to water. It really is something long-lasting and having much sort of life-changing experience which stays with those people long or when the project is over. So I think this people-to-people, this trust, this willingness to feel solidarity and empathy with our neighbors is something that is very important. Secondly, you mentioned living labs of European integration. I mean, simply put, border areas are sort of test for European integration because European integration should work as smoothly in the border areas as in the mainland, right? And if it doesn't, people feel it and tell us what works and what does not work for them. And the answer is which is the answer that we do not hear so often these days, that they want more Europe. Because European integration, which works well, has a very direct effect on the quality of their life, on the opportunities, and on the future. So they want to have the access to the hospital on the other side of the border. They want to enjoy the opportunity to commute and have the same privileges and benefits as people who are working on the other side. They want to have an opportunity to cross the border without any obstacles. And I think one of the lessons of Interreg in the last 30 years was that these obstacles, which are sometimes due to different legal administrative regimes, sometimes due to different interpretations of European legislation, they are quite important. They make sometimes life of people very hard. And that is why we came with this proposal of European cross-border mechanism that would be making member states to look at those problems and come with the solutions. And that is why we have peace solutions, which we'll be listening to, I think, quite soon. So it is quite rare that people in those days of also Euroscepticism is asking for more Europe, for more integration. But this is what is happening in border areas. Third, I think there is also economics or social and economic interactions that are triggered by Interreg projects. And, whatever we're talking about, innovation hub or small cycling path, people on the both sides of the border are better off after the project than before. And I think this applies to two situations, or two very different situations in both areas. If you are talking about less affluent, innovative, creative regions that share the common border, this results in more innovation. And I think we'll hear the example of Gorizia and Nova Gorica, where two cities that are laying very close to the border between Italy and Slovenia turn the peripheral situation where they're divided by the Iron Curtain into a sort of growth pole. So they just reinvented themselves completely. And from being far away, distant and remote, all of a sudden they were turned into source of growth, creativity and prosperity. Interreg Europe is also driving new ideas into the cohesion policy. And I think if I look what is happening right now, perhaps the most important is that it's quite close to the people. It often goes to the local level. It is driving people-to-people project. It is allowing also sometimes for the citizens to come up with their own ideas. One of the innovations that we put on the table for this financial perspective is small funds project, which is also working well in the area where Paulo is coming from. And this, we can really see how this bringing in new beneficiaries, people who would normally never think about becoming beneficiaries of cohesion policy. And this is important because, people are feeling often more distant from the policy making. There is also some issue about economic democracy. So this close link to citizens is something very important for Interreg. And finally, the enlargement. I think we are the only EU instrument which has institutions on the other side of the border in countries like Ukraine, Moldova, or Western Balkans up and running. So this is a great lesson for those countries, how to make use of EU funds, but also how to run EU policies, because they operate along the same rules as the institutions on the other side of the border in the EU countries. And I think if we look ahead, if we look what is the accession process, I think that this offers great opportunities to use Interreg and maybe use Interreg well beyond the cross-border context. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and we will hear a bit more about that cross-border enlargement side of things with regard to Ukraine in a few moments. Martin, let me turn to you. Tell us, what are the biggest achievements and what is the future potential for this sort of cross-border cooperation?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation and also for these questions, because this gives us the opportunity to show some of the results, or at least the impact of some initiatives promoted by DG Regio particularly, and that has been already mentioned by Director Tokarski. Well, I think that the main achievement of cross-border cooperation in European terms has been to put Europe close to the ground, near the citizens, or I would say even that bringing the citizens closer to Europe, with all the positive effects of this virtuous circle. Of course, everything has been possible in Europe thanks to Interreg, mostly. We always say that there is life after Interreg, but because there was some cooperation before Interreg, but it was something there was a kind of pioneers that after the Second World War decided to change a little bit the dynamic between European borders, that traditionally was to fighting each other, and especially in certain borders. And they started to make early cooperation, people to people, getting connected, particularly trying to develop trust, which was missing really, quite normal if you are fighting all the time. At the same time, the European Union, the European communities were developing, but at a very high level, as a kind of club of states that were meeting from time to time in order to put some money in a common box to do this and that. But suddenly it was a big change in the 80s towards policies which were closer to the citizens, developed much more during the 90s, particularly after the fall of the Berlin Wall, when the European Union, already named like that after the Maastricht Treaty, became the big opportunity for the whole of Europe altogether. And it still is the case. We don't think that there would be a better development of our continent without the EU. And there are a few big policies where most of the money is there, I mean, 10T, etc. But really, we find that the most relevant EU policies related to engaging the citizens are Interreg, particularly cross-border cooperation, and Erasmus. So we think that this was really big achievement and still is the case. And of course, Interreg has been developed for 33 years already. We count of several dozens of thousands of projects involving hundreds of thousands of citizens, and all of them mostly in border areas, with all the challenges. First of all, there is a huge difference between citizens living in the capitals and those living in the periphery, particularly in border areas. And I'm not thinking of Malmö and Copenhagen, but I'm thinking of the really rural territories, low populated, mountain regions, etc. But the border that was a line of separation during centuries, in the last 50 years, and particularly the last 30, have become meeting points. Actually, we made it's not a study, but we made a kind of survey a long time ago, I think 2 or 3 European elections ago, and we identified that there was a very low participation of the citizens in European elections in general, but in border regions there was an increase. You could see that the citizens in border regions in general were and are much more aware of Europe. Somebody told me, yes, because we have plenty of signs of the EU everywhere. Well, that means because you will see some figures behind. That means there is a strong investment. Then probably the situation we have in most European border regions, let's call them cross-border regions because they are places of integration, is the great awareness of Europe. These are the places where Europe should be built. It's very important to have meetings of the Council and this and that, of course. But every step we do in border areas to generate trust, to convert these areas into functional areas where citizens are not looking all the time to the capitals in order to look for their opportunities, but having this 360 degrees vision of the development of their lives in the territory in border areas. This is an enormous achievement, and we think that this is where Europe is being built, really with a solid basis. It's very difficult to go back.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think you're absolutely right on it, bringing people together. I was on holiday this spring in a beautiful rural area, and I see a sign to an Interreg meeting, and my friends say, what's that? Oh, it's an EU project. And in fact, it was in Slovenia, and we're going to look now at a Slovenia-Italy project on cooperation in the area of healthcare and the difference that's making to the people there. Paolo, before I come to you, let's have a look at the video outlining what it's all about.
Sono molto felice oggi di parlare di questo bellissimo progetto che ci ha visto coinvolti insieme ai nostri colleghi sloveni, che è quello appunto sul tema della gravidanza fisiologica, dove veramente si è lavorato proprio per il raggiungimento di numerose eccellenze da riportare nel territorio.
V času izvajanja projekta smo se seznanili z Centrom za duševno zdravje v Italiji in to je za nas ena velika pridobitev, polno enih novih informacij. V času izvajanja projekta se je tudi naš Center za duševno zdravje za odrasle zelo razširil, pridobili smo veliko kadra in ravno v ta namen smo tudi pridobili prostore in njihova obnova je bila financirana iz projekta.
Doprinos projekta je predvsem v povezovanju slovenskih in italijanskih društev, ki delujejo na področju socialnega varstva in zdravstva.
Grazie a questo progetto abbiamo avuto la possibilità di avere a disposizione degli spazi per il trattamento di bambini con autismo, migliorare le nostre conoscenze e condividerle con gli amici sloveni grazie a un modello di trattamento che è l'SDM e la formazione sulla comunicazione aumentativa alternativa.
Čezmejni sporazumi skupna čezmejna infrastruktura in storitve, ki smo jih zgradili, so seveda zelo pomemben del projekta in pri tem smo bili uspešni. Še bolj pomembno pa po mojem je to, da smo v tem času zgradili neko zaupanje, sodelovanje med ekipami z ene in druge strani. To je najboljša popotnica, da bomo tudi v prihodnje uspeli vzdrževati in zagotavljali trajnost teh storitev, predvsem pa zagotavljali kakovostne čezmejne storitve za naše prebivalce.
We often hear in Brussels, in the EU bubble, that health is a national competency and there's only so much the EU can do. But I think that's a fabulous example of what actually can happen on the ground and how much trust can be built. But Paolo, I'd like to hear a little bit more detail from you about what has been the role of the EGTC in this and how is Interreg really working with the lives of those citizens there?
The various tasks that I've had throughout my life, I have to say that being a president of the EGTC Go is, from a humane point of view, the most beautiful. Because not only, as you have just seen, we've managed to do great things in the health sector, but ours is a fight and a daily battle on how to overcome barriers, on how to overcome borders which never really existed for us, because for 1,000 years this was a single territory. So we found ourselves suddenly at the end of the Second World War with a barrier that divided families, but also farms from bedrooms or even cemeteries, and the train station in Gorizia. This was unbelievable to us. But you have been able to see what we managed to do, and I am extremely proud of this in the health sector. This is a great project worth 5 million euros, and together we have managed to treat diseases with dedicated centres, and I believe that this is an exceptional result. When it comes to cycling paths, we've also done beautiful things, including a pathway that crosses the Isonzo River and brings together the two sides. But we have been working on our shared obstacles together on a daily basis. I don't only wish to talk about what we have done. It would seem like a self-appraisal, but I also want to talk about what we intend to do. For instance, for cross-border workers and the problem of their safety when they're employed under a range of initiatives. We need to ensure that they have proper social security, which is an extremely important issue that I would like to deal with in the near future. For people living in this area who experienced this situation between two borders, believe me, we have one overarching problem, which is the geographical situation. So the support provided by Interreg can provide us with real miracles in lands that were devastated by the war and by politics, who put fathers against sons and sons against their grandparents and pitted them against each other. I hope that this has very few other instances in the history of humanity. So I would like to thank all of these projects wholeheartedly, including the ones we aim to carry out in the future.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Absolutely fascinating. As you say, I think if the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us anything, it's that disease knows no borders, and so our healthcare response should be able to work cross-border as well. I think we're going to take the temperature of the room with a Slido question now. So I'm going to ask you all to go to your Slido, get your smartphones out, go to slido.com, and you can put in there EURegionsWeek. And we're going to ask you a question. We're asking, what are the fields where EU support to border regions makes the greatest difference? If you haven't gone to slido.com, you can just scan that QR code that you saw at the beginning. Hopefully you have that still there. So we're asking that question, what are the areas where the EU support to border regions makes the greatest difference? And it's a multiple choice question, so you can select cross-border infrastructure and hard investments, removing legal and administrative obstacles, support to local development and better public services, or building trust and solidarity among neighbours. And you can see there on the screen where the voting is taking us. So I see that a lot of people saying that building trust and solidarity among neighbours is very important. One thing we didn't put as an option on the poll was all of the above, and that's because I know people would just click all of the above because it does make a difference in all those areas. But we wanted to get a sense of which one of the areas was really standing out to you. I can see that none of them are at 0, so support to local development and better public services and cross-border infrastructure and hard investments are both getting a lot of traction. Removing legal and administrative obstacles, perhaps a little bit less, but certainly building trust and solidarity among neighbours seems to be the highest voted there. So I see 60 people have voted, so we'll leave it open a few minutes longer, but I am going to turn to Slavomir to get your reaction to that. I'm sure seeing those videos where we saw such engendered trust may have influenced people, but what would you have clicked if you were going to vote in that?
Well, I think the vote was somehow influenced also by this very moving video that we've seen as the first one. But otherwise, I think, well, it's quite good that the building trust and solidarity among neighbors comes in first. And I think also Paolo made a contribution to this when he was saying about fathers and grandfathers who were devastated by war and politics. And now there is this sort of healing when they can work together. So I think this is also my take, as I already mentioned in my introductory remarks. But I think it's also good that there is a certain balance between different objectives for Interreg, and we also see that other elements of value that are coming up quite prominently. Because indeed, Interreg is not only doing one thing, Interreg is doing many things, and I think this is something also very important.
I think so. More than 70 people voted on that, so I think it's only a small sample, but it's hopefully instructive for us. We're going to have another question, and it's going to take an open format this time. So again, you can scan the code there, or you can put in EURegionsWeek on slido.com. And the question is, in one word, what should be improved for territorial cooperation in the future? I guess this is questions about what can the EU do more, how can it act, what's possibly on the agenda for improving territorial cooperation. So more funds, money, I suppose those mean the same thing. I knew they would come up, of course, they always do. Awareness, a budget again, more about money again. Governance, government also similarity. Availability, infrastructure, communication, education, business, simplification. Reduced by propaganda, not sure what that's doing in there, but perhaps it's got a twist on it. Law, availability, money and communication. I'm afraid to say money and communication are the top ones there. Governance, simplification, reduce barriers. I'm going to let people keep doing this, otherwise I'm just reading the words money and communication and governance over and over again. Slavomir, once again, your take on this. I know it's easy to say more funds, but there's other issues there as well, like communications, like simplification and awareness. And I suppose communication and awareness are linked to each other.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I take it as a sort of more information to the citizens about the opportunities that are offered by Interreg programs. But money is also not something that is negligible because, without money, it's difficult to have projects, and without projects, it's difficult to have a good communication and awareness among the citizens. And I think we really need to mobilize, and sort of talking right now for Interreg community, to avoid what happened last time during the financial negotiations, that for the first time Interreg was actually, the money allocated to Interreg was actually reduced. And I would insist that today we need Interreg more than ever, and this should be also reflected in the financial allocation to this strand of the cohesion policy. So I think we all should really get mobilized, and also seeing all those fantastic projects, and have one voice in asking for more visibility, more prominence, and more money for the future Interreg.
Well, thank you. I'm going to ask if there's any questions from the floor. If you have questions for our speakers, you can raise your hand. We'll get a microphone to you. Meanwhile, Martin or Paolo, would you like to comment on those word polls? Martin, any thoughts on what you saw?
Sure. I think it was very interesting to see the first concepts or words. As I said before, there is life after Interreg, but without Interreg would not be possible to be where we are, because what would be needed also governance. Actually, Interreg gave an answer to the demands of funding. And now we need, the more Interreg is developing, we have new needs which are more expensive. So we will need more funds for sure. This is one main issue. But we need more governance. First, the border regions were coordinating their work in a very informal way. Afterwards, there was a kind of bilateral treaties, but there was a need of general support to governance because member states or nation states would not give it by default. Then the Commission came with the EGTCs, which was a great achievement. And now, after so much cooperation, we have identified that if we have more cooperation, we will find more obstacles because it becomes more sophisticated. Then another need is to solve border obstacles. But to this end, also the Commission has reacted with a very complex process, which from our point of view is extremely successful. The cross-border review, the communication 2017, and the implementation of 10 initiatives, including B-Solutions, where we are very much involved, identifying many obstacles to cross-border cooperation. And all of them give us, again, the same answer. We need more cooperation, we need better governance, and then we need to keep on solving border obstacles. So I think it was very well summarized there.
Paolo, your thoughts, what might have been your word? I saw plurilingualism was on there, so I'm going to say I'm very grateful to the interpreters today.
More cooperation is the first step, but I think in my country, in my region, the problem of the school. In my region, nella mia regione, si parlano.
In my region, we speak 4 languages. In the northern area, we have some German regions, and in the majority of the region, Friulano is spoken, which is part of Ladin. And then we have the Slovenian area, and then, of course, we have Italian. Just imagine, even just in schools, how much work we still have to do in order to integrate everybody, because it is inconceivable that somebody like me, who was born 27 kilometers from the Slovenian border, doesn't speak Slovenian. This isn't acceptable in a civilized country. I believe that we have an infinite number of interventions, and I apologize for being provocative here. I see that, of course, we're lacking money, which is always important, but we're also missing out on creativity and ideas. Interreg is a tool that makes all of this real. It makes creativity and ideas real. And I sincerely hope that at these sessions we can put forward the big problems that we have in trying to integrate people and include them, particularly in cross-border areas. And this isn't just in schools, because whoever experiences this on a daily basis knows perfectly well what we call soft mobility. We're trying to make sure that crossing borders is swift, so that passengers don't realize that it's happening. But believe me, it is a daily struggle. And the very last point I'd like to raise, if you'll allow me, is that I'd like to propose an idea. In Italy, we don't have that many, but we have quite a few cross-border cities like Gorizia and Nova Gorica, who are cut in two by a border. Next year, I would like to bring them all together, ideally inviting people to Gorizia in preparation to Go 2025 to talk about these very specific and real problems that we all share. This could be an important step forward. Thank you.
Well, I think you've covered a lot of ground there and taken us on quite a journey. Have we questions from the floor? Has anyone want to raise their hand with a question for our speakers? I don't see any immediately, so we'll go to the Slido questions. If people are shy, don't forget you can use Slido. You can keep your smartphones active and put it in there. Go to slido.com and put in the hashtag EURegionsWeek. So I mentioned it in one of my comments about the COVID-19 pandemic. But one of the first questions that came in is, how did Interreg work when borders closed during the COVID-19 pandemic? Can you tell us a little bit about that? What was the outcome? What impact did it have? I mean, we saw, for example, that very first water project that took place despite the COVID pandemic. But Slavomir, can you tell me if there was any big impact?
Well, I think we all felt the impact of COVID in the way we were meeting and discussing with other people, but perhaps I will rely here more on Paolo, who had a very direct experience on this. But for Interreg it came as a shock, I think, because Interreg people were living in this reality of basically daily crossing the border and having these strong interactions with the people on the other side. And then, in a very dramatic way, you know, from one way or another, the borders were crossed. I think it came as a shock for border communities. It came as a sort of physical barrier that was really limiting and hampering their daily life. So there were those cases on some of the borders where people came up with slogans saying, you know, we miss you, to their neighbors on the other side of the border. And I think that was also a clear proof of how integrated or how close the life was on both sides. So I think it came with a sort of great relief. And I'm also saying now from the perspective of European Commission, when we could again physically talk to our friends in Interreg programs. But Paolo, I think you lived it on the front line, so I think you can add something here.
Yes, Paolo, feel free to jump in with your own experience. And then I have another follow-up question for you.
Grazie, Slavomir.
Thank you, Slavomir. It is a daily experience, something that we see every day, that of trying to find solutions to everyday problems that our people are experiencing, thanks to what you're doing for us. But as I was saying just a moment ago, these projects must be created and designed based on specific problems on borders, and not all borders are the same, because some borders were born of wars. Other borders are historical. The border between Portugal and Spain, for instance, which have been like that for centuries. They are not just a few decades old. This is why I'd like to go back to my previous proposal. It would be very useful to try to understand altogether what our daily issues are for each one of us, so that we can come up with suggestions, ideas, and opportunities for the European Union to step in through Interreg or other solutions.
Well, Paolo, a question has come in from Elise asking, how would you include those who do not want to learn another language? I think that might be directed towards you. I suppose communication and making them aware of the advantages might be an answer. Let me repeat the question. How would you include those who do not want to learn another language?
In my very humble opinion, teaching languages right from a very young age should be compulsory. Because in a civilized world, it's just not acceptable for people not to speak the language of their neighbors. This mentality is a result of nationalisms that I hope will be buried with the last century. We still have some remainders of nationalisms, but we are here to give new generations opportunities that others didn't enjoy. And I apologize for talking about my personal experience. My grandfather spoke German because he went to school in Austria, and Austria was my country, therefore. He obviously spoke Friulano, obviously spoke Italian, obviously spoke Slovenian, and a little bit of Hungarian, because he used to go to Hungary to buy horses. So it's inconceivable to think that my grandfather could speak 5 languages pretty well, and I can only speak 2. This means that there has been a cultural regression, which certainly we can't be proud of, and that Europe should have the ability to solve this issue.
Thank you, Paolo, for the answer, and thank you, Elise, for the provocative question. Another question, this time from Jelmer Huismans, says, not everyone is committed to the EU, but it does offer good tools like Interreg. How do you think governance and communication should be structured to maybe reach out to local government? Martin, do you want to give us your thoughts on that?
Well, governance and communication, this is a big issue. You were mentioning the Brussels bubble, or the EU bubble. There is also a European territorial cooperation bubble, an Interreg bubble, where everybody, I think all of us, we know each other, we meet very often, even online, and particularly during the pandemic. So the family is getting really strong. But outside our bubble, it's so hard to communicate. It's so difficult to communicate. I don't know if, I think there is a general, in the mainstream, there is a general fear of what we are doing, because we are removing barriers we are crossing borders, removing barriers. We are trying to forget about the traditional governance and find new ways of governance, but we don't have the power at the local and regional level. It's in another level. So there is a gap. So here we traditionally say, we ask the EU member states to share their sovereignty seriously. To the top for the European integration, to the bottom for making possible decentralization, decentralized practices, but also this coordination with your neighbor. It's very easy to say, very difficult to implement. And when we are able to remove this, to generate the sufficient doses of trust in those who have the main power, which is the nation states, probably we will be able to communicate better. I think it's very much connected, this communication, with the serious governance of cross-border cooperation.
Another question, I think it's a rather Commission question. Is a separate instrument, namely Interreg, the best way of supporting areas in the border areas? Wouldn't it be more effective to incorporate Interreg objectives into regional programs? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, that's a tricky one, right?
Yes, and thank you for the question, whoever sent it in.
I think that Interreg created indeed this community of experience and community of practitioners that has value in itself, and I think it would be difficult now to depart from it and try to do it from scratch in the mainstream of cohesion policy. On the other hand, we are also very much aware that there are many projects which are fantastic, which are created in border areas where the Interreg cannot help because they require other scale of means and other scale of support, or they require means to be upscaled and replicated somewhere else, and this is where the mainstream funds are coming in. So we are very much now into this idea that cross-border projects or projects created within the macro-regional strategies, which is another form of transnational cooperation, to those projects also mainstream policy shall contribute. So we really asked all the programs now to put a clause that is saying that, yes, we will also look around, we will try to find cooperation with other partners, and we'll try to devote some money from our regional or national envelope to this type of cooperation. And I think this is very important, this instinct of not trying to invent everything yourself, but first have a look what your neighbor is doing. And I think that also contributes to this curiosity and incentive to learn languages. And this is a sort of creativity we are often speaking about, but sometimes we forget to use it for something very concrete, like innovation, like new projects, new ideas, bringing in people with different experience and different skills.
I see there someone has asked the question about how do you see cross-border cooperation on EU external borders in the near future. We're going to come on to that when we get to our final segment. But for now, I think I'd like to wrap up just this current round of questions with the same question that's come in from Vale to all three of you, which is, what is your vision for Interreg and cross-border cooperation for the next 10 years? Or what would you like to see it look like in 10 years' time? Paolo, can I ask you for your thoughts?
Poco lontano da quella di oggi.
Not far from today's. It is a slow process, but it is bearing its fruit. We mustn't get discouraged. We must persevere and continue, as well as to convince and inform people.
Martin, same question to you. What should it look like in 10 years' time?
Well, I think the vision of the EU in 10 years will be an EU probably of 35 member states. Even I think that Britain will be back. We will have probably the Western Balkan states. We will have Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, probably some more. That means that, as usual, those borders that were the external borders of the EU will become the new internal borders. It happened in the past. And every time that there has been a strong increase of EU members, cross-border cooperation has increased in quality, not only in quantity. So we think that the cross-border territorial cooperation in general will become even much more important than ever. Member states will have understood their role The EU budget in general will be much higher, including for territorial cooperation, and cross-border areas will become really the spaces of integration where everybody is going to look at.
Oh, thank you. A brave prediction on Great Britain, I think. Slavomir, what's your predictions? Do you share Martin's enthusiasm?
Yes, definitely I do. The more frontiers, the better in a certain way, right? As you mentioned with the enlargement. But I think I also would like to see really this, that the Interreg is really close to citizens, close to people, because sometimes there is this feeling that these projects are for somebody else, that there is nothing in it for me. I would like really to see, couple of young people getting together across the border and saying, well, this is the project. If we really manage to do it, we would stay here, we would like to live here, and we would like to live and to link our future to this place. So really the capacity to listen to people and to follow also on their ideas.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. We're going to add a couple of new speakers to our discussion because we're going to hear about two very specific projects. So please, I would like to invite onto the stage to tell us about their experience, Renato Reis, who is the coordinator of the Extrusion, Compounding and Advanced Materials at the Centre for Innovation in Engineering, who is going to tell us about the Valor Natura project on the Spain-Portugal border. Thank you, Renato. And then Florian Lochner is the EU project manager at Health Across, who will tell us about the Health Across project in Lower Austria with its Czech neighbours. Thank you very much. Renato, I'm going to hand the floor over to you first. You've got a presentation to tell us all about what we've been talking about rather abstractly, how that works for you in practice.
So thank you, Jennifer, and thank you all for being here. So I bring a small presentation and a video, of course, that tries to explain and tries to materialize, I would say, all the questions that we have talked and discussed here. So the integration between cross borders, the innovation, how can these projects make some good to the population, to the communities between the cross borders? That's the idea. So it's more technical than the practical, I would say. But I think it's a way to put it in some products and in some applications, these cooperations between the cross-border countries, okay?
Well, let's see the presentation.
I think we have a small video.
Valor Nature, la Euroregión del Norte de histórica, cultural, geográfica y económica común en un área de aproximadamente 50.680 kilómetros cuadrados donde viven unos 6,4 millones de habitantes. La Euroregión se enfrenta actualmente a una serie de significativos retos. La competitividad está por debajo de la media de la Unión Europea y la gran mayoría de sus empresas son pymes. En cuanto a la dinámica de la I+D+I, la Euroregión se presenta como moderadamente innovadora, con un gasto en I+D de aproximadamente el 1,5% y el 0,94% del PIB en la Euroregión. Valores que aún están lejos del objetivo definido por la Estrategia Europa 2020 del 3% del PIB, ante los retos a los que se enfrenta la Euroregión.
So compared to the obstacles that the region is tackling, we have Valor Nature that aims to contribute to new cooperation in order to create new knowledge, including the enhancement of environmental resources. With this dynamic, it will be possible to promote intensive technologies in the Euro region. The project, which has been promoted by will be using the PIEP for the Technological Center in Galicia. And SERA aims to be an innovative hub that will promote innovation at excellent levels, that will respond to the needs of the northern Portugal and Galician regions.
So okay, I will have just a few slides to explain better the video. The video was in Spanish. Okay, I hope everybody would understand the idea. Okay, so what is Valor Nature? So it's the Interreg found the creation of a center, innovation center, for the excellence of sustainable materials. So the idea was to create new materials, and the idea was to pick natural resources that was thrown away, that was wasted from some other sectors, and then develop new products, new sustainable products for industrial applications. How it was done? So there are 3 centers of technology and innovation. PIEP, one, it's located in Guimarães, it's in the north of Portugal, and we work with polymer innovation. There are STAG, that is a technical and innovation center in automotive industry, that is located in Orense, in the north of Galicia, north of Spain. And the other one is Xera. Xera, it's a center that work with the forestal and wood materials, and it's located in Vigo. So the cross-border was between the north of Portugal and the Galicia, in Spain. And the idea was to create this center to help the development of new materials and help to put this material in the industry, okay? It was mentioned in the video, it's the competitiveness of this region, it's below the average level of EU. So we need to work, the measure of the companies are small and medium companies, so we need to improve the competitiveness of these companies. We need to improve the materials so that we have better products and better applications. So the main resources that we use it, and that's why it's called Valor Nature, it's nature resources. So the huge amount of them is from the forest, okay? The other one is from the mining. We have several industry working on mining, more than 360 in Galicia and more than 300 in the north of Portugal. So we try to identify the better wastes on these already sectors producing and use them, okay? And the other one, of course, we are the north of Portugal and Galicia. Half of our border is from the sea, it's with the sea. So we need to take a look on the sea. We need to take a look what is the wastes that we can find on the sea, and then try to use it on new materials and new advanced materials for new applications. So we were able to collect 12 different wastes and different materials, all of them endogenous in the north of Portugal and Galicia. And we work with these materials, combining them with more sustainable plastics. That's the idea, is to replace the less sustainable materials for more sustainable materials. We work on that, and then in the end, with collaboration of a few companies, we were able to at least demonstrate the final result in some technical demonstrators. We have here some examples of that. That we transport the wastes from other industries, combining with the polymers, more sustainable polymers, and then we apply them in the more advanced materials. So that's another example. And in the end, we were able to, we start with 3 technical centers and 4 companies, and we went up with more than 50 companies that we were able to join the project in the end. So in the end, I would say that the outcome, at least the technical outcome, it's more than 10 articles, more than 5 master's theses, more than 100 visits to companies. It's quite important to put people talking to each other, visiting the companies, try to understand the problems in each company, okay? Of course, 15 value endogenous resources used, more than 30 development materials ready to be used in industrial application. It's not on development, it's already finished and it's developed. And of course, we produce more than 25 technical demonstrators, but we can use the materials for a lot of them. Of course, the ecosystem now starts with 3 technical, end up with more than 50 companies, associations, universities, technical centers. Everybody come from the north of Portugal and Galicia, come to this project, and it's quite interesting. And actually, we are already working on a new project that will be the follow-up of Valor Nature. So we will working now on the 2030 new project. It's the Green Hub. It's to try to scale up what we get in Valor Nature.
I've just a quick question from Margot Tarot, just asking, is this cross-border cooperation facilitated by an EGTC, the European Groupings of Territorial Cooperation?
Yes, it was an Interreg project. It's POCTEP. Yes, it was an Interreg project, of course.
Absolutely. Let me turn, Florian, to you. Tell us a bit more about Health Across. It's healthcare projects, something we've already talked a bit about on the panel, but give us about your experience about the added value that cooperation has brought.
Yeah, that's the right one. Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me here today. It's a big pleasure to give you all a short input in our Health Across initiative and showing you the added value, possible added value of Interreg projects in cross-border regions. Yeah, perhaps I would like to start with challenges of health, because challenges are the reason of why Lower Austria put such a great effort in the field of cross-border cooperation. So, of course, the biggest challenge is in health. I think it's the same in nearly every country. The limited access to financial resources, personnel, and also the challenge of providing the best medical treatment for all of the citizens, also for those living in the border regions, which are partly or mostly more rural regions. So every challenge needs a solution. The sooner the better, and one solution among many others can be cross-border cooperation, collaborating together in the border regions. Of course, it's not that solution that fits for every problem, but it can be one solution. And yeah, so every health system have their strengths and weaknesses, and you just have to find out the strengths of systems from neighboring countries, and then you can try to make use of these strengths for your own population. So going directly in the practical thing, I would like to start with our Health Across for Future project. We already have successfully implemented a lot of projects, especially with our neighboring countries in the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and also Hungary. But especially the Austrian-Czech border is very good for such cross-border cooperations, because we have the unique situation of having a so-called divided city directly on the border. So we have the city Gmünd České Velenice. It was divided within the World War by the Iron Curtain, going directly through the middle of the city. So we have the north part of the city, České Velenice, belonging to Czech Republic, and the south part of Gmünd belongs to Austria. So the citizens living in this divided city are able to use the same infrastructure in the field of schools, sport teams and so on, but a few years ago it was not that easy to share also the health infrastructure, and that was the initial starting point of our initiative back in 2006, 2007, to start working on this cross-border issue in the field of health. And so our Health Across for Future project is already the third project in this region, directly implemented in this divided city, and our aim was to plan a primary healthcare center located directly on the border, on the Austrian-Czech border, and which can be used from both sides of the border, so from Czech people and also from Austrian people. And we did, within our Health Across for Future project, we had, of course, a lot of project pillars, but one of the main pillars was to do the planning of the construction, planning of the organization, of the financing and so on. And besides that, we, of course, was in need of financial, of money, and so we were thinking about some European possibilities of financing this primary healthcare center, and at the end we got 100% funding out of the European Fund for the Rural Development. So that's one lesson perhaps I would like to give all of you. Sometimes it's necessary to not only think of one project fund, but perhaps it's possible to combine at least two funds together for improving the situation of everybody and for keeping the best out of the project. And so about nearly 2 years after we had our opening ceremony of the primary healthcare center, we are totally full, and we are currently thinking about extending our primary healthcare center because doctors are very impressed about working together under one roof, doctors, nurses, therapists, and also patients from Czech Republic and Austria are really loving this situation. So it was really, we were able to improve the situation for Austrians and Czech people in this border region. And that's a direct added value of an Interreg project. And yeah, perhaps another practical project we implemented together with Czech Republic was, we called it Jointly Healthy Together. It's a bit, the translation in English is a bit not sound so great as in German. It was about, so we knew that we were not able to treat women suffering on endometriosis on the highest level in Lower Austria. So perhaps for all those who don't know what I'm speaking about, endometriosis is a female disease which can lead to heavy pain and in the worst case also to childlessness. And yeah, we know that the Czech partners already had a certified center for endometriosis, and so we asked them for help within this project. And so they came to Lower Austria, to our hospital of Melk. They trained our doctors, our nurses in the field of detecting and treating endometriosis on the highest level. And yeah, so now about 2 to 3 years after the project ended, we are very proud about being also a certified center for endometriosis in the hospital of Melk. We were able to treat a lot of women suffering from this disease, and perhaps the best thing of this project is that we were able to give birth to a lot of children. And yeah, so it's sometimes you need a long breath. It's not the easiest thing to implement cross-border projects, especially not in the field of health, because you know a lot of different systems, a lot of different stakeholders, holders, players, people, institutions, politicians, insurances, companies. You have to involve, but at the end, it's worth it. And yeah, so it's perhaps one lesson I would like to mention: never give up. So sometimes you feel like Don Quixote during his fight against the windmills, but at the end, it's great output.
We have a follow-up question, Florian, for you, asking about the sustainability of the hospital and whether country authorities are ready to take over and finance the hospital in the future.
The sustainability of the primary healthcare center, I guess. Yeah, it's total sustainable. It's running and financed by the insurance companies, by the money they get for the treatment. So it's, yeah, we don't have to pay anything for this.
Good. Another question that I'm seeing coming in, I'll put it to Renato and Florian, to you first, but perhaps our other guests will weigh in as well. There's a suggestion that evaluation of projects can take too long, or that the calls published in some programs is a gap up to 3 to 4 years for the programming. How can we speed up the process? And if you want, do you think, Renato, that we need to speed up the process?
Yes, it's a nice question, but it's a tricky question because as it was mentioned, we need time to have results. We need time. If we have projects of 3 months or 6 months, we don't have time to have results. So the example that I bring here, it was a 3-4 year project. It was not possible to have results before. So the projects take time, the results take time to have it. Now we can and we must focus on evaluate properly the results, because it's critical to the next projects, what will be the path that will be followed. I think it's critical, but I think it's not possible to have good results without these 3-4 years.
Let me ask Florian, is that your assessment as well? I mean, we're talking about time and some people want to go more faster. Is it necessary to take this reflection time?
Yes, of course. I didn't mean the question again.
How can we make the evaluation process faster? And then I asked Renato, do we need to make it faster?
Of course we do need to make it faster, but how, it's a good question. If I could answer this, I wouldn't probably not sitting here, so I don't know.
Well, Slavomir, let me ask you to address that. I mean, it's a sort of a concern that programming takes too long and that 3 to 4 years seems like a long time. Is there any way or any need or any appetite to speed up the process?
Well, I have the same concerns about the evaluation. If you really want to show results, and for us it is important to show the results because it's also about the policy future, the value added of the policy, and so you need some time. I mean, don't think it's really possible to do it 1 year after the project has been completed. So I don't see an easy way, an easy shortcut in this. There was also the second part of question about calls for proposals. Again, there is no one single solution for all, but normally we are looking for a sort of 3-4 calls during the financial perspective. So that on one hand, you don't do it every 6 months, which puts a lot of administrative burden on the programming authorities, but on the other hand, there is this opportunity to come up in the second or the third call, and also the second or the third call coming later in the financial perspective, give this opportunity to keep up with the developments in the region. So it can be really, focusing on something which is actual, which is pertaining to the region. So I think 3-4 calls, probably it's something that is optimal.
Martin, I see you taking notes. Do you want to add a comment?
Yes. Yeah, well, particularly regarding this question on evaluation, this reminds me also some exchanges we have with the stakeholders on the ground regarding the implementation of the program periods. That is always, if this period ends in 27, we can expect that most projects will end in 28 or 29. And if we look at the external borders, even later on. But when we explain this to people who are not in our family, they say, but this is too much delay, but how can you live with that? Well, this is the best way. I think there are pros and cons, but we have the experience on the ground means that we already have a previous period programs that are overlapping somehow. But thanks to the flexibility which is applied by these type of funds, then things are quite well coordinated and everybody is aware that the framework, the time framework is what it is and not what is in the paper. So at the end, and the same happens with evaluation. We prefer to have the evaluation a little bit late, but well, because then I have to say that many, I don't know in other programs, but in Interreg, the evaluations are taken into account. I don't think that for the preparation of the regulations and programs, perhaps it is, but for the implementation of projects, for sure. At least we take this very seriously, and whenever we have the general evaluation, we analyze very well, because we always find excellent tips for our partners. So, yeah, I agree very well with this vision.
Well, thank you for the question. Let me see just at this point if there's any questions in the room. We do have microphones. If you raise your hand, you want to ask anything of any of our current crop of speakers. If not, I'll remind you again, you can go to slido.com and put in your question. Put in the hashtag EURegionsWeek, and that will take you to this current session. I see there is another question on there already. Cinzia is asking a question. Florian, I think it's for you, but then I might get Paolo to comment as well. One of the most common problems in pooling healthcare services is the different costs of service across borders. How did Health Across solve this problem?
Yeah, unfortunately, this question is for me. It's probably the biggest and most complicated question. As for the Health Across our Future project, so for services within the primary healthcare center, we got a contract with the biggest health insurance company of the Czech Republic that the costs are okay for them. So we have no problem in this setting. But of course, for treatment in the hospital, it's a bit different because the prices differs a lot. And so we found, well, as long as the project was running, we had the possibility to finance the difference out of the project budget. And after the project ended, it's a bit complicated to negotiate together with the Czech Republic. So it's an issue we have to solve. But of course, as I said, it's not the case for the primary healthcare center. That's all done.
Paolo, I wonder perhaps could you comment on this question as well about the difficulty in reconciling the costs of services that might be different across borders?
Ma io non sono un tecnico che entra nel...
I'm not a technician who will go into the details, but I've never heard my experts and the technicians talking of this aspect as a difficult one. To the contrary, we have been able to set up a center to make appointments that is working in the Italian and the Slovenian side of the city. It is known as the CUP, a CUP, a number that you can call to make reservations. But we have agreements regarding the costs in Friuli Venezia Giulia in compliance with the national regulation in force and the Republic of Slovenia, which, as far as I'm concerned, have really been able to overcome this problem.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm conscious of the fact we only have 10 minutes left on this session, and there's an empty chair there. We're not empty chairing anyone. It's empty for a reason because we have a special guest arriving. But in anticipation of that, I will come back to an earlier question that we skipped over, which is on cross-border cooperation with external borders, and in particular, how you might see that developing in the future. I know, Martin, you mentioned Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova. Let me ask you, Slavomir, to focus a little bit on the Ukraine border collaboration and how a tool like Interreg can make things easier.
Well, first of all, it is very important to Ukrainians. And I think we were really surprised to see that even in the first days of war, they were still keeping contacts with us and implementing projects. So I think for them, the importance of working together with Europe is a sort of, glimpse of this better world, which stands in stark contrast with today's reality. So really, even we are getting messages, we are getting documents that were prepared even in bunkers during the artillery shelling on the Ukrainian side. Second thing is that, and I think this is interesting, that our cooperation there is not really entirely shaped by the war experience. There is a lot of cooperation between the hospitals, which of course is influenced by what's happening in the war, but there is also appetite for other forms of cooperation, which shows, I think, this value of Interreg, which is this multifaceted character, that it does many things at the same time, and that people on the border, they have appetite for different types of interaction. So it is not only about refugees, it's not only about wounded people, but it's a cooperation which has much more colors and sides. And I think thirdly, there's this big question, okay, we start accession now. What does it mean for Ukraine? What does it mean for our external border? What does it mean for cross-border cooperation? And I think on one hand, to be positive, our border with Ukraine, I'm talking here about Poland, Romania, Hungary, all of a sudden became the border which is very, very dynamic. There is a very dynamic exchange of flows of people, of goods, of business connections that makes it really fascinating to see it against the backdrop of the war. And as I mentioned, we are the only EU instrument which has institutions on the Ukrainian territory, both at the local and central level, that are up and running. So there is a question on how they can be used in a broader context of reconstruction of Ukraine, or post-war reconstruction of Ukraine. And I think that we could do probably more than we were used to it, but it remains to be seen what this more could be.
Well, Martin and Paolo, I'm going to ask you just both briefly, do you think the Interreg instrument is flexible enough, agile enough to deal with a situation like the war in Ukraine that is obviously very demanding and challenging? Martin, yes, please.
Well, I think that in absolute terms, Interreg is very flexible. But that we are dealing with a very particular way of cooperation. Probably we will need more. It's the same case with simplification. The question is, I'm not sure how far can we go with simplification, because there has been an enormous effort so far. And when we go to the particular case of the cooperation with Ukraine, there perhaps the main difficulty is not the simplification of the programs or whatever, but more to put this cooperation in a higher level. There is a general demand that looking at the experience of the last 30 years, we should have a cross-border perspective on any policy. We would like that the cross-border cooperation will be a cross-cutting issue in all policies, particularly energy or healthcare or public services in general, transport, taking into account crossing the border not only for the big transport line, but the secondary network in cross-border areas where, thanks to B-solutions, we have found a lot of things, a lot of obstacles. So with Ukraine, the same. The cross-border cooperation could be an excellent instrument to prepare the accession to the EU, not taking into account now the situation of war, but particularly the western regions of Ukraine. They are well trained in cooperation, so they need stronger programs, probably an adaptation, and this is happening, an adaptation of the programs to the current situation in which Russia has been excluded, whatever, but also to take this opportunity to involve in the debates, because Interreg is also about exchanging information and dialogue across the border on the issues energy sustainability, proper services, and again, mobility, which is a major issue. We have members in Western Ukraine, and mobility is a major issue. Anyway, if I may, I would like to drop one sentence regarding a particular aspect of external cross-border cooperation, which is also very relevant for us, and it is the regions bordering Russia. In particular, the case of Finland. Until 2 years ago, it was an excellent example of collaboration, because the part of Russia which is there is not that Russia, because it's Karelia, and the Karelians know, so the collaboration was excellent, beautiful, with very little buts. And now this border is a close border, and even Finland joined the NATO. We should also think of the future of this part of the EU, which is really being challenged right now.
Well, we have a man who is expert in that very thing joining us in the room. So I'd please like to welcome to the stage the mayor of Lviv from Ukraine, Andriy Sadovy. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for making the journey to be with us here today. We will let you catch your breath, and we'll have a look now at a video that demonstrates some of that cross-border, external border collaboration that we've been talking about. We're going to look at a video showing collaboration and cooperation and a lot of solidarity between Poland and Ukraine. So let's have a look.
There was an blink idea that we have a big building over here, very close to the border, to the Ukraine, created for the training center of the mountain rescuers. We create this building for about 35 places for refugees and for about 25 rescuers, paramedics. Another part of our help is collect the stuff from the Poland, from the Europe, some kind of medicine, some kind of food, hygienic stuff, and we transfer it by vans through this borderline of Krashenko to the Ukraine.
Działania, jakie obejmował projekt, to budowa infrastruktury po stronie polskiej, infrastruktury skierowanej do dorosłych osób z autyzmem. Mamy świadomość tego, że właśnie w ramach projektu powstała infrastruktura, która może być zaadoptowana na takie lokum dla uchodźców. Dysponujemy 12 pokojami z łazienkami. Zaadoptowaliśmy pomieszczenia, które są pokojami, a łazienka do wykorzystania to jest łazienka na korytarzu. Wspólna. Na dzień dzisiejszy mieszka 51 osób.
In In the first days, for about 2 weeks after the war, the monastery of Rawa Ruska was the place for refugees. We are involved in organizing transport of humanitarian aid to Ukraine, also to monastery, our twin monastery in Rawa Ruska, which is a hub, also the stock of humanitarian aid.
Our partner, the vocational school number 5 from Chernivtsi, they are hosting right now 400 people, refugees from the conflict area. We are organizing every week a support group for mothers, refugees from Ukraine, to identify first needs, what they really need to stay in Suceava. Currently, upstairs, we have an after school. There are coming like 50 children with age between 6 and 14 years old. And we are offering languages training based on English and Romanian. Also, they have an arts class.
Ștefan cel Mare University of Suceava was involved from the beginning of this crisis, refugee crisis and the war in Ukraine. We organize a refugee center. Right now we have more than 10,000 nights offered to the refugees from Ukraine. It's important to provide each individual with some donations. So we open the store here at the observatory, astronomical observatory, and they come and choose every day 10 products per family member for everyday use. That was an important effort, and this effort still continues.
So, Andrei, I think we've saved the most striking example until last. So the final word really will go to you to explain to us, with war raging in your home country, to what extent cooperation with the EU, particularly on these borders with your near neighbours, is important, and what does it mean to a city like Lviv?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. I am late. I'm sorry, in Brussels traffic jam. You believe in Ukrainian victory. Ukrainian victory has two parts. One part, the occupied Ukrainian territory. Next part, rebuild Ukrainian country. If we want to rebuild Ukrainian country, we must have good collaboration between countries, democratic countries, and between cities. Ukrainian government have good collaboration with government in different countries in Europe. But for me, very important, have collaboration with cities, cities to cities, region to region. It is bedrock our victory, next step. Let me give you a few examples. 5 million internally displaced people passed through Lviv during Russian invasion. We had days when Lviv hosted 2 million per day. All families in my city hosted IDPs. Today we hosted 150,000 IDPs. But all time I have support from our twin cities. And every day Lviv hosted wounded, civilian wounded, children, women, elderly people, Ukrainian hero. But we built in Ukraine, in Lviv, ecosystem of humanity unbroken. Together with city Freiburg, city Würzburg, city Vilnius, city Warsaw, city Reykjavik. It's very, very important collaboration, but I am mayor, I am not doctor, but today I have huge responsibility about good quality surgery, about temporary, permanent prosthetics, about psychological, physical, social rehabilitation, about we look for a new job for our hero. It is a huge project, but collaboration with our twin city very important for my city. And every week, we hosted in Lviv delegation from different Ukrainian cities. We have special program, residents, architecture residents, medical residents, ecological, economic residents, and we inspire Ukrainian city. We demonstrate tangible result. I think Lviv, it is good city for build special bridge. Europe, Lviv. 2025, Lviv will host a European Youth Capital. It's a very important event. But if we expand our collaboration with Ukrainian cities through Lviv, we will have tangible result very quickly. But my message very, very simple. We need collaboration. We need different advisor, example, supervision. It is very, very important for Ukrainian city, but every day we have stress. Every day in my city we have funeral ceremony. 30,000 my citizens today in front line. You must understand, it's not easy. But I must think about current situation and I must think about future. Current situation, support internally displaced people, support wounded, support my citizens, and think about future. Our victory, it is collaboration with European cities, European region. I am ready to give you maximum information about our project residential in Lviv. Welcome, only together. And you must believe in our victory. We must build our victory together. Only victory, never give up. Thank you.
Well, Andrei, I'm not going to try and top that. That was a fantastic way to end our session. I think we do wish you victory. I think that goes for everyone from the EU side to the Ukraine side. Thank you very much to all our speakers for your great input, looking in at those really quite good detail on some of those projects. Thank you to everyone who's joined us for your questions, some of them provocative, some of them very leading and allowing us to say what we needed to get across about the importance of breaking barriers to cross-border cooperation, be that within the EU and on our external borders with our friends just outside the EU. So thank you very much. Another big warm round of applause for all our speakers. And with that, we'll end the session. Please go grab some food from the food trucks, network.